Right. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute. Still waiting for people to join us. I hope that everybody is well. And for the Americans, hope you had a nice Thanksgiving. We always give thanks, by the way, at filerskeepers, even though we are European, because we, as filerskeepers, earn 60% of our revenues from the US. So during Thanksgiving, we're pretty quiet as well. So we enjoyed the quiet day. Yep.
And you had a lovely Thanksgiving message too on LinkedIn, Vana.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. Yeah, I think we're just gonna get started. Thanks everyone for joining. Today we want to talk about from policy to practice, and I'm joined here by my very good friend and professional friend, Phyllis Elin, and
Hi, everyone.
and well, thanks, Phyllis, for joining us today. I'll let you introduce yourself, maybe after a few household announcements. We are recording today's session, so you can rewatch or share it later. And we would love to hear your thoughts. So please ask as many questions as you like via the Q&A. Grab a cup of coffee or tea. Phyllis and I are drinking tea today. And yeah, get comfortable. We're very happy you're here. So maybe very briefly, I'm Wanne Pemelaar. I'm the co-founder and currently CEO for filerskeepers and a little baby company called Lawstronaut. What we do is we read all the laws in the world and we take from their rules to tell companies how long they should store their records and data. And we have a dashboard where you can build a bespoke retention schedule and we can keep that up to date for you. So when the law changes, we can send you a ping and say, hey, the law went from 3 to 5 years. Do you accept or decline? For me, the hot topic is, and it's something I wake up every single day, how do we make this real? How we got a retention schedule, how do we implement that, embed that into the organization, processes and systems? So I'm very happy that Phyllis is here because, well, she is... I think you wake up every day with the same question. So Phyllis, maybe you can introduce yourself to our
Sure,
audience.
Vana, thank you. Yeah, hi, everyone, and thanks for attending today. I'm Dr. Phyllis Elin. I'm founder and CEO of Knowledge Preservation, a global information governance and data privacy consulting firm. I myself, last year, had my 50th anniversary in the records management industry. I used to say that I started in the cradle. I don't say that so much anymore, but it's obviously something that has kept me interested. I actually picked a career. I am doctor, has nothing to do with what we do here. I have a PhD in English literature, 18th and 19th century English novel and Chaucer, but I'm also a paralegal, and that's how I got involved in records management. I worked for other global companies, and I had the first iteration of knowledge preservation, the Elam Group, which was very successful for over 20 years. And we worked with basically every vertical market that is available these days, and also within a lot of global entities. Vana and I started our partnership about 5 years ago. I think we sort of met on LinkedIn to begin with, and I'm a great advocate of LinkedIn. And I should also mention that one of my business partners, Max Rappaport, and I have written over the past couple of years 4 books on our topics. I am now known as a global SME. And I always say that in addition to everything else, I've been on the Jumbotron at Times Square. As you can tell from my accent, I am a New Yorker and very proud of that. So with that, I think that's enough about me, and let's get started. And Vana, back to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, actually, I want to start with a question for you. because I want to dive in. When people say, I got, we are a consultancy, and this is what we do, maybe we can get a bit more specific, and you can tell a bit about, the common client problems that people reach out to you about. This is a slide I secretly stole from KP's own slide deck, and there were all kinds of questions on there that intrigued me. But yeah, maybe you can tell a little bit more about your practice and yeah, when people come to you.
Okay, sure. Well, most people who reach out to us, and fortunately, most of the people who end up reaching out to us are in the C-suite. Of course, records managers and so forth have more of an elevated position these days. Certainly, we have gotten out of the basement where everyone seemed to have been when I started when I was a kid. But the kind of things that people reach out to us for are various on-ramps. Of course, they reach out to us when there's potential litigation, and at that point they know that their retention schedule has to be up to date, and it's probably not. When there are mergers and acquisitions ensuing, you have to decide, for example, who will be the primary, whose retention schedule and policy and procedures will we be following. We do a lot of work as far as that's concerned. I'm just like going ad hoc here with really important reasons that people reach out. For example, we get involved in a lot of back file conversions, and we actually call that a smart solution, because we know that many people image these days either by themselves, or they might use imaging firms that might say 7 cents an image, 8 cents an image. But what we want to make sure is that when documents are actually imaged, that the same taxonomy for the record type is the same taxonomy on the records retention schedule. We want to make sure that documents are only scanned that has a good shelf life. If it's something like board meeting minutes that have a perpetual ongoing retention period, that might just stay on a box on a shelf at a record center. So, I mean, there are all sorts of reasons that people reach out to us, but I would say M&A, also litigation or potential litigation, needing new policy and procedures because you're probably in a new jurisdiction. A couple of years ago, when the GDPR in Europe ensued, then a lot of people were taking a look at that because they have multinational companies. So I could go on, but basically here we see about 12 reasons that people reach out, and there are a lot more reasons. I could spend our whole 45 minutes with that, but those are just some of them, Vana.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. And well, there's some very, you know, fashionable themes in there. It has been fashionable for a long time, but now, with all fairness, who still cares about the physical records in a time of AI, where you need to be able to data mine everything, and everybody is still spending a whole lot of money on storage of hard copy records. Again, I'm not. I do understand that there is a need for that, but I also am realistic, and I know that a lot of those records are overdue on destruction. So yeah, it's a good reminder for everyone. Scan or purge, basically. That's it.
And one other thing,
Right.
let me just continue. So in addition to that, we also are proponents of smart shredding. So when actually documents have met their retention period, again, we want to make sure that there are certificates of destruction to actually close the stream of documents, the life cycle of records. And we want to make sure that we do the smart scanning in addition to the smart shredding. So I just wanted to mention that too.
Thank you. Alrighty. So today we want to actually, make sure that everybody is able to implement their retention schedule in practice, and we are gonna talk about why that fails and why you need dynamic maintenance, and how you can operationalize your retention decisions, and how do you can then get to actionable retention schedules. Again, we need to make those retention schedules real. So why does it fail? Well, maybe we can, first dive into a little broader point, and that is, why does everybody need IG? And then we can go into the question, like, why is that so hard to achieve? And this is maybe again something for you, Phyllis. But what do you see as the drivers for a good IG? Yeah.
Well, this
Program.
this slide emanated from knowledge preservation. So these are
Yeah.
the type of things that we look for at a high level. Of course, everyone is looking for a return on investment, and we just want to make sure that we only scan or maintain records that still have a life as far as the retention period is concerned. So when we talk about the smart scanning and the smart shredding, we also want to make sure that an up-to-date 2025, now 2026 records retention schedule is available, because that's actually how we ascertain what records get kept. Records would remain stored in the box, as I was mentioning before, with the perpetuity records, such as the board meeting minutes and so forth. So we do look for an ROI. Other things that we do too at the end of the engagements, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is make sure that we're only scanning documents that still have a shelf life. Otherwise, we're going to go into the actual secure shredding. In addition to that, we have to make sure that we're scanning the right documents by having an up-to-date records retention schedule. So cost savings, happy staff compliance, and breach defense all start with the foundation of an up-to-date records retention schedule. Because of that, we will end up with happy staff, as opposed to the staff that we interview to develop our records retention schedules, who always say that they haven't had enough training in records retention or records management, information governance, that they really don't know if they're the office of record that maintains the original record, if they could keep a convenience copy even if they're not the office of record. Are they sure that they have the correct contract, they have the proper addenda associated with it, and so forth? So going into a records retention program that also would probably include policy and procedure, staff training, and so forth is so important for a happy staff. We talk about regulatory compliance, and we make sure that our schedules are legally defensible best practice. And and through filerskeepers, everything is updated. So the actual citations are always updated. So whatever the retention period is on the schedule, you can be sure that that's the one that you can will have regulated, and the regulators and auditors will obviously be very happy seeing what's happened with that. They will see all the citations that we're using and anything else that they're looking for, which will be a complete retention schedule, which we're updating all the time. Bonnie, you might want to mention a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. What I was thinking while you said that was, a lot of times, regulators are simple organizations in a way. They have, let's say, somewhere between 1 and 20 laws to enforce, and or maybe 100, but that's it. And they are very specialized in those, but that's all they see. And a retention schedule based on all the roles that apply to you is a very, very strong defense mechanism for a regulator that says, that has a one-dimensional view of the world, and that only looks at its own laws and say, oh, yeah, thou shalt keep personnel file no longer than 2 years, and then completely forgetting that there is a 7-year bookkeeping requirement or something. Yeah, so something to battle to protect yourself against small thinking, and also all of this is all against the backdrop of AI. And today, for Lawstronaut, I was talking to a client, and we were having a discussion about, should we add legislative history to all the data? Should we track all the laws, and should we add to that legislative history? And they went like, well, you get so prone to hallucinations if you do that, because all those deliberations, all those opinions about the law can be easily confused by the AI as the law itself. And it might very well be that's just the opinion of, I don't know, an industry association through a public consultation or something. And that's it. To put that back into the records retention context, you have so much rot and so much trivial and old data in your systems. How do you think your AI will work well if it gets trained on old data? So less is more, people. Yeah.
And I guess I should just finish that slide with breach defense. And as we just said, the regulators and the auditors love knowing that actually the staff has actually been trained in records retention and records management principles. So that really helps with the audits and so forth. I just wanted to finish that slide, Varner.
So, and how come it's so hard to build a retention schedule and to implement it? Because it sounds all very logical. Well, they're usually, old school retention schedule are not implementable. Written like legal documents, nobody understands what they're saying, and have too difficult in their setup. There's no ownership. Nobody is really clearly accountable. We have some responsible people, but that's usually where it stops. Who's accountable? What is the the executive that ultimately everything rolls up into, and who is accountable for compliance here? It's not embedded into systems and processes. It's outdated already when you launch it. But then if there are changes, there's poor change management. And it's overly complex, and all of that leads to no trust in deletion. So we are all, in our DNA, from our origin, we are hunter-gatherers. We like to gather things for our survival. So we hold on to our records because we think it's important for our survival. We're holding on to way too much, but you can build a golden Maserati of a schedule. If the business doesn't believe in it, nothing gets deleted. Let me assure you that. And then, of course, there's often not an integration into privacy or cybersecurity. And you need those folks on board because they could be your biggest advocates for the retention schedule within the organization. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all was well until the GDPR arrived. And I always show these two slides because I always want to remind everybody it's all about real compliance. Yeah. So building a retention schedule is only a teeny tiny bit of that real compliance, but it is about, embedding that in your organization and actually purging data and keeping it in the proper way. So, I always, this is a picture of the European Parliament when they voted the GDPR into law, and as you can see, it was fully packed there. So and I was there live to witness it, and every speaker was talking about, we want real compliance. And the GDPR ever since has had this ripple effect over the entire world, and we have hundreds of privacy laws now as a result of that law. And how do you then become compliant in, what's the privacy machine? You map your systems, your data flows, you perform your impact assessment. Then you implement mitigating measures, and you manage and administer risk, and then you communicate about it. Yeah, that's the kind of like the flow on how you get privacy compliant. I don't need to explain this to a whole lot of people because everybody is either doing it or has done it already, and is now maintaining it. but records retention is part of this flow, because the moment you start mapping systems and performing privacy impact assessments, one of the most important questions is how long are you holding on to those records and data, and for what purpose. So it's part of that machine. And then, yeah, I would love to see a world where we're no longer working in silos, but where we have these tribes, I would say, between made out of different teams: data governance, records management, data security, privacy, maybe AI compliance. I see more and more folks writing on their LinkedIn, I'm now an AI governance specialist, or guru even, or whatever. It's great. I think those folks belong in this picture, but everybody needs to work together. It's all part of the same puzzle. And I believe that records management has a lot to provide. It's not just the life cycle management of records. I think the records managers are essential for data quality. They know the organization very well because they study the records and data of the organization. They know where everything is. They know what is of value and what's not. And I think they're often overlooked. And it's also partly because records managers, at least the old school ones, still care way too much about the physical records. But I do see real glimmers of hope. Some really thoughtful blogs and papers coming out now, where records management and AI meet. And I really think that I'd love to maybe in follow-up sessions cover some of those blogs and maybe even the writers, although I've learned very sadly that one of my favorite blogs writers has recently passed. So really trying to preserve those blogs and because they're of great value. All right. Yeah, so how do you feel about this, Phyllis? Like, and do you see in your practice more collaboration between these specialisms?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just was going to actually articulate that. So before I talked about a steering committee and at a very high level, normally from the C-suite, but the actual personas that we see here: data governance, records management / information governance, data security, privacy, AI compliance. If you also add the general counsel's office or the head of legal, corporate legal, if you add risk, audit, technology professionals, and so forth, all of these in the C-suite would be part of the steering committee. So yes, so in my practice, we try to incorporate everyone here at a very high level, in addition to some of the other people that I just articulated. But the steering committee, and actually a steering committee from a corporation, or it could also be from the public sector, really starts with advocacy on high. So that's why I keep saying that the C-suite is actually where we're looking, because that's where we like most of our engagements to begin. Because we do when we actually develop our policy and procedures and our retention schedules, we send that back to the client for their blessing. And that's why we have to incorporate these people plus the others that I just mentioned to make sure that we have complete compliance and that the corporation or government entity agrees with everything that we've done.
Yep, I completely get that. You want to aim for as high in the organization as possible, though sometimes we're just not getting there. But I think you guys have way more luck with that than us. So yeah, and then of course, how long are you still going to store your records? And with that question, how we look at the world, at least from filerskeepers' perspective, is we see that there are three issues that organizations deal with. The first one is they don't know what the law says and laws say. So there's so many rules. At this moment, filerskeepers is at 350,000 citations and counting still. There's always more to be uncovered. I think, roughly speaking, there will be 1 million rules in the world. That's my guesstimation. Guesstimation. I'm saying that because there are also at the more municipal level also a lot of rules still that you could uncover. We're still debating if we should go that deep. But then the moment you know the law, what do you choose? Because laws are conflicting and there are so many, and you have to make choices. You can't just comply with everything at the same time. Your systems are not equipped, and you are not a records management organization. You have a completely different purpose. And then the last one, of course, is, where do you start with implementation? Because you got so many problems there: hard copy versus digital, the global, local, cloud, on-premise, structured, unstructured, current versus legacy. So we believe that you should deploy some strategies, because you cannot promise your leadership that you're gonna, solve all their problems. You will set yourself up for failure if you do that. So we need a balanced approach, and that's why, it's very important to have a dynamic system of maintenance, basically. Maybe Phyllis, you can talk a little bit more about this slide.
Sure. We like to well, we talked about blogs before, and at Knowledge Preservation, we usually do a weekly blog as far as a high level interest is concerned. Sometimes we talk about the public sector, some the private sector, but dynamic retention does reduce many systemic risks, and that's why we did a more cartoony thing here, because it's really very important. And this is a slide that you'll probably be able to use yourself as you discuss this with your leadership and so forth. Of course, we have privacy risks. We talked about GDPR, and little by little we are getting more privacy legislation in our country, in the US. Actually started in California, and now many states actually are going into a privacy situation. However, with our new regime, it seems as though regulations and so forth are perhaps not as important as we all think, as governing this discipline is concerned. But a privacy risk is extraordinarily important, and also something that happens with data breach and so forth, which happens all the time now. We have to also make sure that the record keeping keeps pace with the business growth. So when we say that mergers and acquisitions are an on-ramp for us, that's really very important, because we want to make sure that all of the operational requirements and all of the records retention requirements are the same, with the same nomenclature, the same taxonomy, when companies merge or are acquired. So that's extraordinarily important too. We talked about data breach, so having good record keeping practices, the right information in the right place at the right time is extraordinarily important for things of that nature. And again, when we train people about records retention schedule, policy, and procedures, we talk a lot about data breaches, which really resonate with almost everyone these days, unfortunately. We, in addition to the actual retention period for the citations, the government citations and everything else, industry specific and so forth, we also make sure that the operational requirements are part of the retention schedule. So for example, if a retention period, according to citations, is 7 years, and a firm has to keep records for 10 years, and there's a very good reason for the 10 years, then it could be actually switched from 7 to 10 years. So business decisions and operational requirements are very important. Yes, AI drift, we want to make sure that we don't have much garbage in and garbage out, which is what we used to talk about with mainframe computers years ago too. Some of the terms just have stayed, but we also want to make sure that there aren't outdated, that there's not outdated information that can't get involved with AI, because then the hallucinations and everything that Farna just talked about are rampant, and we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And business teams have to really make sure that their records retention and policy and procedures are up to date so that they're actually working with the most current policies and not with something antiquated. So that's why everything has to be constantly updated, both now electronically as it was physically in days of yore. Would you like to add anything to what I just said?
Yeah, well, with the data breach, what I a recent experience I had with a client was they had a breach, and then the public outrage was yeah, we there was employee data of 10 years old in there, and we were like, but that's only normal, right? um so employee personnel files can get very old, so there's also sometimes just no winning with this kind of stuff. Yeah, you just lose because a journalist can write a nice article about it even if you're compliant. So but it's, of course, it's not really important what the journalists think. Ultimately, it's the regulators that can slap you on the wrist. um I want to talk a bit more about, operationalizing retention decisions, if you don't mind. And I always say you have to start with the exceptions. So when you start implementing a retention schedule, you should start, well, with your legal hold. Um, do you have a legal hold tool? Do you have a full inventory of your legal holds? Are you sure? Do you know all the custodians? Have you lifted all the legacy holds? Very important stuff. We usually get a response like, yeah, we're in control of legal holds. And then when we start asking these questions, people go, well, we do two really well, and the other two, I don't know. um, and also, like, a lot of times we see that legal holds have such an enormous scope, which is just so unjustified. Really, do your operations in Fiji also fall under the U.S. legal hold? It's not always that far. It doesn't always extend that far. Um, and how do they expand? Yeah, do they apply internationally? Yes or no? So I think this is a very important topic to first talk about. Um, so how do you deal with legal holds, Phyllis?
Well, that's actually a couple of questions that we ask during our needs assessment gap analysis, which usually begins every engagement. Interestingly enough, legal holds might not be something that the departments understand, and they might actually have legal holds on records far after a case has been completed and so forth. So we that's again, it's a couple of questions that we ask, and we want to see what the legal hold policy is. Obviously, we like to get that from the legal department, from the general counsel's office, and so forth. But we do find that documents never really get off a legal hold. And that's the kind of thing, when we develop policy and procedures, we make sure that that is incorporated into our policy and procedures, which are so important. But legal holds have really been around forever. But it's important also in the records retention schedule itself, for that record series or record type, there is a legal hold column, and then we actually just check that box, so to speak, to make sure that we know that things are still under legal hold. But again, people should be trained to make sure that when a litigation is completed or postponed or whatever, that it isn't in the same status as it was before. That's actually been pretty problematic for the years that I started being, by the 20 some odd years that I've been involved with the records retention schedules and corporate clients. So it's something that really has to be taken a look at, because it's not necessarily adhered to as it should
No.
be.
And this is often what I find sometimes a bit demotivating, that, we built this whole retention schedule, and then we get to the moment of truth, like how we're going to implement this, and then legal steps in and says, sorry, all our records or our data are under legal hold. And we're like, whoa, okay, that's quite a lot. Are you sure? But I mean, sometimes you are sure because you don't know what the custodian is, or who the and you need to kind of freeze everything until you do know. But you need to manage the legal holds, because once you get rid of the data, it's gone. That's the whole point of deletion. So you better hold on to anything that falls under a legal hold. And we're always happy to think along if you need a good legal hold to, or you're unhappy with your current one. And then we can think along on what to do. Once you start thinking about where do I implement, then it can get pretty overwhelming. It's pretty much the same as starting to write a retention schedule. It's also overwhelming, so you need to right size that. Well, first of all, we always say start with a pilot. Don't promise your leadership you'll solve all their problems. So start with something that's tangible. Say, okay, we're going to fix one system. And Phyllis, what do you think the number one type of system is that people will start with?
I'd be guessing, but you probably know the answer, so I'd like to hear it from you.
No, you go. I just want to hear from your perspective, because you
I guess I would say HR.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody at this moment is doing HR. Yeah, HRM systems, HRIS. That's what it's a high risk system, contains a lot of personal data, but it's relatively easy to tackle because there's a lot of willingness in the organization. First of all, it's not your user or customer data, so it's not as political. You're not making a lot of money with it. It's a risk, it's a cost, and it's usually HR will be game, because they're compliance oriented anyhow, for labor laws, tax laws, and other type laws that they need to comply with. So they're most often compliance driven. So but then the question is, if you have done your pilot and it has been successful, you have been able to implement filters in there, then what, right? And then what we see is that companies basically make one of two choices. Either they're going to go for their top systems, their top 10 structured systems, unstructured, like ERP, CRM, your office suite, or they go for their they go by department. So once you start with your HRM system, what's there to say to not just do all your payroll as well, and your recruitment systems, etc.? So just tackle HR as a whole. Yeah. So those are the two flavors, and I think it's at the moment 60-40. 60% chooses to just fix HR completely, and then 40 will go for the top 10 systems, basically. I don't think there's any right or wrong, in here, but that's it.
But doing one department first as a pilot to really get started is the way to go. I've been touting that for years, and I would agree with that. And as you state here, HR, finance, sales, etc., that actually is a good a good strategy for following.
And also, like, a lot of people are sometimes a bit disappointed that I always point to a unstructured system first, because the highest risk is in unstructured data, is in your Microsoft, your Google, and I agree with that. That is the highest risk. However, I believe that once you set up your policy house, you train your people, everybody is at their stations, they know what to do, then please use an unstructured system first to just test everything out. The moment you start hovering with your finger above the purge button, your business is going to get super nervous. They want to validate everything, test everything, approve everything. Yeah. So you want to use that as a use case to not just purge an unstructured system. You wanted to use it as a use case to test your processes and procedures and see if they work well. And once you have some experience there, then you can look at your Office suite. And also there, I believe, go for a topic within your unstructured data rather than I'm going to fix everything. Why not look at HR there first and try to fix that part first before you move over to something else? Because now you're specialized in HR records management. Does that make sense, Phyllis?
Yeah, it actually does make sense. And when we talk about during our implementation, once we're completed with the staff training and program rollout, then we do get involved in rot removal of the redundant, obsolete, and trivial. And we always start with the unstructured. So I totally echo what you're saying.
So, when you are mapping against a structured system and in unstructured, you will face different issues. But structured systems, you run into three issues. Yeah. Scope differences between your schedule and what the system allows for. Yeah. So the retention schedule says the difference between regular leave and sick leave, because the law makes a distinction. Tools like Workday say, well, no, we call that all absence. So it doesn't matter the reason. It's all grouped. What are you going to do? You need to make a choice. Data dependency, right? I want to delete A, but I cannot delete A without also deleting B. And A and B have different retention periods. What are we going to do? You have to make a choice. Triggers. The law says end of fiscal year. System says, sorry, we can only do termination date. What are you going to do? Those are all legal decisions still. And usually at a level that lawyers don't want to operate at. That's usually where a lot of things get stuck. So what we see a lot is that companies hire a Workday specialist or something, if the system is Workday. Workday specialist knows how to set up all the filters, does it, but then for these kind of decisions, they look back at you and they go, don't know what to do here. You decide. And that's where it usually gets stuck. Legal is busy. And that's why I think you can definitely use an external consultant that has experience with these kind of decisions and isn't afraid to help make those decisions. Let's because I'm also mindful of time, and I want to bring home a few more points. I'm going to go very quickly through the next few slides. But there's a whole process to targeting a structured system. Yeah, you need to look at how the system is being used, but also what are the upstream, downstream systems to that system, and what are the dependencies. You can delete something in A, but it's never system A. But it's never just system A. There's a system B, C, D that flows after that. So you have to be mindful of that. You need to get insight in the structured data model, and you shouldn't just assume that you can purge at data field level. That's usually not how it goes. It's usually more data table level, or for some really smart systems, they group certain data fields together and they call them, I don't know, info types or purgeable data types or destruction objects or whatever. And that's the level you need to map against. So before you go nuts, study the data model, understand the system requirements when it comes to purging data. You need to map your retention schedule, and you need to draft and what we call an executable purge policy. Basically, it's a mapping between the schedule and the purgeable data types, and then you will run into all those issues, and then you need to map that, and then there will be filters that you can set, and then you will implement those. And then you will test and validate and mitigate those, because the business is very afraid that your systems are going to go down or you purge the wrong items. So that's not the case. That's not how it should be. So you go from legal rule to retention schedule to purgeable policy, and you need to build translations, from those rules. So you will actually literally go from the law says from 10 years from the date you became aware of the damages to 10 years from the termination of the employment agreement. Those are big gaps, big leaps that you'll be taking, but they are very common. And we believe that you should not adapt your schedule to the systems. A lot of people do that. You should have a practical schedule that human beings understand, and you should then apply that schedule to the system. And the gaps that you find then when mapping, those are the ones you want to address and log. And we always look at, we call it like a residual risk matrix, yeah, where we say, hey, we found an issue, and therefore we need to address that risk, and we haven't been able to fix the risk. Okay, bring it to your leadership, have them sign it off. Yeah, so that's important. So you got yourself covered as well. Unstructured systems come with a whole load of other problems. And I think the most important bit is you need to understand and structure that data, classify it before you can do anything with it. You don't just have a Microsoft problem. You have a records management problem there. You have 2,000 team sites. Your SharePoints are a mess. We can fix that, but how are you going to make sure that that mess doesn't, you clean up the mess, but how come how are you going to avoid that the systems aren't going to be a mess in 2 years again? Yeah. So you need to design everything for the future, and encourage your business to be compliant now and also in 2 years. And you need to do a lot of data discovery on that information, whether you like it or not. Yeah, I really believe you can't do it anyway else, or it's going to be a massive manual exercise, and you will have to get your whole organization involved to clean up the mess together. I don't think any company has the budget and willpower to do that like that. Any thoughts here, Phyllis?
Well, my thought, I guess my first thought is we're creeping a little bit past our time. So I want to make sure for everybody's purpose that we're expedient. So I think perhaps we could just move on.
Yeah, so maybe let's just talk a little bit more about the typical IG relationship phases, and what it is that you guys do to help companies.
Okay, I mentioned this a while ago, but basically we start all of our projects with the needs assessment gap analysis, and that again is by utilizing the steering committee. I talked about the people who would complement the steering committee. We would actually have a kickoff meeting with the steering committee and representatives of the functional areas, so they would understand when we send around a Survey Monkey the questions that they would have to answer and so forth. And again, the Survey Monkey is a collaborative effort between the client and us to make sure that we're getting all the information that we need. The end product is the information that we need to update, create from whole cloth, or vet the current retention schedule. And also our clients love knowing what others in their sphere are doing. So we also do benchmarking with all the policy and procedures that we set up in the needs assessment and gap analysis, so they see what their competitors are doing. Then we also, and everything gets approved by the client, by the steering committee, and by legal, of course. So needs assessment gap analysis, policy and procedure writing, which includes the records retention schedule, staff training and program rollout, and then implementation, which could be rot removal. It could be sending documents off-site if they still have a lot of physical records. It could be the smart scanning and smart shredding that we talked about. It could be evaluation of various systems and solutions. We tend to be agnostic because as consultants, we really feel that we should be. And then ongoing maintenance. So when we complete a project, then we actually recommend that we update policy and procedures and the schedule every year. And we usually get a stipend for doing that. And also to answer any questions, also if mergers and acquisitions ensue, if there's any changes in jurisdictions and so forth, any changes in the departments that actually maintain the actual records. So that way everything stays compliant every year after we actually develop the whole program.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very thorough exercise, and I would really recommend it to anyone because it's the only way. Basically, you need to understand where the gaps are, and you need to fix them. And there are often more and wider gaps than you think. Yeah.
And
All right.
we also, and just one other thing. So many law firms actually develop retention schedules, but I probably, for people who have schedules, times we're reached out to most is actually just taking a look at what the attorneys did, but they didn't take a look at it from everything that Vaughn and I have been talking about today. And that's why, people really want to understand if they have a legally defensible retention schedule, even if it was developed by their attorneys. And ultimately, yeah, there's no one size fits all solution. And would you like to end this for us, Fana?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of companies don't yet know how big of a problem they have and how big of a project they should run in order to fix it. And I think it's almost similar to when privacy started. And I know that sounds weird for a practice and industry that is older than privacy. IG records management just is. However, now with AI, now with the new systems, this is where it becomes very, very important that we get back in control of all of this. And I think there's a new wave of and maybe a new golden age for records management and IG coming very soon. And I see it because I see more privacy professionals suddenly getting interested in the topic. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, so maybe we can hear it from you. See if there's any questions in the chat. I don't see any. Feel free to ask us anything. But I'm also okay to just give people 7 minutes back of their time. Oh, there's a question from Mark. So the question is, when different systems or jurisdictions produce conflicting retention rules, what's the most practical way for organization to bring those entries back into alignment without restarting the entire schedule from scratch? Phyllis, any thoughts, or do you want me to answer?
I would love you to answer that.
Yeah,
I have thoughts, but in this situation, your thoughts would be better.
So I think the idea here is that with the schedule, of course, all countries are sovereign. So we're never saying that one country will beat the other. Yeah. So what we do is we calculate golden standards, and then as opposed to those golden standards, we say, hey, be careful. This one country requires you to keep it a little bit longer minimum, or a little bit shorter maximum. So we will always do justice to the outliers and to the conflicts in a schedule. Yeah. So we won't restart the schedule from scratch, but we will just take into account those differences. And then when you implement that into a system, you are going to basically apply those rules in such a way that you say, for all the countries that are not that one country, say, China 30 years, I'm just saying something, all the countries except for China will do 10 years golden standard. And then for China, we will do 30 years. Yeah. So here, then we kind of apply both. So that's one of those filters that you need to set, and those mappings you need to do with regards to structured and unstructured systems. Yeah. All right. Well, Phyllis, thank you very much. I definitely want to maybe welcome you back in the future. I'm thinking to dive into some of those blogs and that I'm reading lately, and give me a lot of new insights, and yeah, maybe we can just comment on them together. I had a lot of fun with you here on this webinar. For anyone who wants to reach out to Phyllis, here is her email address. So be quick, write it down. But you can also always reach out to us, and then we'll be very happy to put you in touch with Phyllis and the team. All right. Well, thank you so much, and yeah, speak soon, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, and thank you, Vana. It's been fun.
Thank you.